class, and welcome to FNAF-ology 101. My name is Professor Petal. Please open your textbooks to The Week Before. The Week Before is a new interactive novel from the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise that has thrown the community into chaos. In a good way. We've got tons of new lore and information surrounding FNAF 1, but we also got a lot of confusing and contradicting information. Ralph is clearly shown to be an unreliable narrator in The Week Before. His memory is awful. He confidently states he's never brought his daughter to Freddy's, and then later reminisces on the memorable time he brought his daughter to Freddy's. For some reason, you've never brought Copelia here. She's never gotten over the time you brought her to work to meet the animatronics when she was 7. There are multiple pretty blatant contradictions that seem too obvious to be chalked up to poor writing skills, bad math, or worse proofreading. So why is this being deliberately shown to us? There can be 3 reasons. Number 1, it's just a character flaw the writers wanted to give Ralph for funsies. Number 2, we can't trust everything we hear in The Week Before because Ralph is a silly guy. Or number 3, we should take another look at what we hear in the games, because Ralph is a silly guy. Scott uses new media to bring clarity to past media. The Week Before gives us more information on FNAF 1 state by clearing up past inconsistencies and mistakes. So let's go with option 3 and take another look at the games with the idea that Ralph had scrambled eggs for brains. Well, actually, first, let's see where The Week Before suggests FNAF 1 takes place, and then we'll see what contradictions there are in the games. The pop culture references don't exceed 1989, the latest reference being the Sega Genesis. Quick aside, there is mention of the trademarking of Disney's Happiest Place on Earth slogan, which was copyrighted in 1998. You smile, thinking back on better times. For a while, you would have said Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was the happiest place on Earth if you weren't worried about infringing on a trademark. However, I doubt Ralph knows the exact copyright date of Disney's slogan. He can barely remember his name. It's been their slogan since 1955. Additionally, Ralph says this is something he would have said back when Freddy's was popular, which was the 80s, so he's wrong regardless. Just another example of his mashed potato memory. The first page of The Week Before tells us, "You've always worked the day shift, but after a sudden staff vacancy and temporary closure, management has asked you to take the night shift for a change." Sound familiar?
When the place eventually opens again, I'll probably take a night shift myself.
This is a clear callback to FNAF 2's final phone call. Now, we've always assumed Ralph took the night shift when the place reopened and worked it until FNAF 1. But now we know he only worked 1 week. If he took the night shift right when the place reopened, like he says, and only works 1 week, The Week Before has to take place in the first week the FNAF 1 location opens. This places us much closer to FNAF 2 in 1987 than we previously thought. For FNAF 1 to take place in 1993, to use a popular example, that would leave us with a 6-year gap between the FNAF 2 location closing and the FNAF 1 location opening. That's a long time, and Ralph says it was a temporary closure. So FNAF 1 takes place when the location first opens, immediately after FNAF 2, but no earlier than 1989. Well, 2 years is a reasonable amount of time for a business to close, move buildings, rebuild animatronics, and reopen. Anything more than that, and we're pushing the limits of temporary closure. Based on this, we can conclude that The Week Before is telling us that FNAF 1 takes place in 1989. And if you've read The Week Before already, don't worry, we'll cover the tapes, Copelia's age, and more in the next chapter. Okay, so if FNAF 1 is in 1989, our first problem is this.
If I were forced to sing those same stupid songs for 20 years and I never got a bath.
Quick maths, 1989 minus 20 is 1969. Freddy's opened in 1983. Mistaking 1983 for 1969 is pretty bad. So let's partially discount this line with the idea that Ralph has been an employee for around 20 years and is perhaps projecting his time onto the characters with his soup brain.
Hang on, an employee for 20 years?
Just hear me out. Our second problem is this. It's strange to listen to a recording of yourself, especially one from so long ago. If you remember correctly, your daughter had just been born, a big reason why you couldn't take the night shift yourself at the time. Coppelia, Ralph's 12-year-old daughter, was born while he was an employee. More quick math? 1989 minus 12 is 1977. Just born is variable, so we can round to somewhere in the mid to late 70s. But this is from the new material that's supposed to help clarify the date. Why is it suggesting something impossible? Freddy's wasn't open in the 70s. But you know who was open in the 70s? Fredbear's Family Diner. Ralph is pretty familiar with Fredbear's in the week before, unlike his FNAF 2 dialogue. Let's compare.
I think the name of the place was Fredbear's Family Diner or something like that.
He can barely remember the name here, but the week before makes it clear that Ralph can barely remember anything at all. In the week before, he says this. Someone has attached a spare Freddy head, one of the earlier models from the Fredbear days. If he doesn't even know what Fredbear's Family Diner is, how does he recognize which animatronic head models are from the Fredbear's era? Especially considering he has the memory of a goldfish. Sounds more like something an employee would know. You hear children's laughter and bubbly pop music. One of Fredbear's original hits, the secret ingredient is you, which you haven't heard in years. Haven't heard in years. But he's heard it before. He's even aware that it's a Fredbear original. And he only hears like 5 seconds of it in the background of a magical haunted recording. Sounds like something a 22 times in a row Employee of the Month might know.
Well, he could have gone as a kid.
Can you tell me which Chuck E. Cheese songs were Charles Cheese originals? Can you even name one song? For Ralph, with his mashed potato memory, that would be pretty uncharacteristically impressive. It would certainly be less of a stretch for him to so vividly recall this detail if he had, say, worked at Fredbear's for 10 years? Let's take a look at one more quote. You can't remember what year the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opened, or its predecessor, Fredbear's Family Diner, but one year does stick out. It was known as the Big Bite. Why is it phrased like that? He can't remember the year Freddy's opened, 1983, but the year 1983 sticks out? Why is it emphasized that Ralph is unable to remember Freddy's opening in 1983 while clearly remembering another event in the same year? Especially if he began working at Freddy's in 1983, and almost every timeline puts him working there as soon as it opens. Well, maybe he didn't. Maybe he worked at Fredbear's till, say, 1984, during the small overlap when Freddy's and Fredbear's were both open, and then transferred to the already open Freddy's when Fredbear's closed. The opening year wouldn't be as memorable to him since he wasn't there. So, to recap, Ralph begins working at Fredbear's Family Diner in the early 70s, right when his daughter is born. He quickly becomes Fazbear's star employee and begins recording training tapes and memos for the new hires. In 1984, Fredbear's Family Diner closes to focus on their new, very successful spin-off location where no children have lost their frontal lobes, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Ralph is transferred and continues his day guard and employee training role in the new location. But tragedy strikes again in 1985, and Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria shuts down not long after. It doesn't take long for the company to try again with the second location, featuring new and improved animatronics in 1987, which immediately shuts down for the exact same reason as the last one. Oops. After the temporary closure, Freddy's reopens in 1989 in its original location. Management asks Ralph to take the night shift for the first time after a sudden and unexpected staff vacancy. Ralph agrees, but unfortunately, he can't survive 5 nights at Freddy's. And there you have it. A solution to the inconsistencies in the week before and past game timeline contradictions. What do you think? Am I crazy, or have I convinced you? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and all that. This is my first theory video, my first video on YouTube ever, actually, so I'm open to suggestions and constructive criticism. I'm Professor Petal, and this concludes the first session of FNAF-ology 101. Class dismissed.